Hello and welcome to Pastoral Ministry. Today we're going to look at the midterm review for our course, Pastoral Ministry. I'm Dr. Mewborn. It's good to be with you. Let's go ahead and begin the review. I'm going to walk through this pretty quickly, and I'm going to mainly give you slides and concepts that you'll need to know for the exam. So definitely understand pre-modernism, modernism, and postmodernism. Those will be very important to know in understanding the culture that we live in today, especially postmodernism. Sharing the gospel. How do we share the gospel in a postmodern world? One of the best ways to do that is an inductive Bible study, and so know that, and then, of course, these ways of sharing that. Know the differences between orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Know what those terms mean. I'll have that for you on the exam, and so make sure that you know that. What is a good shepherd all about? Of course, these are the characteristics of a good shepherd, so have those memorized. Know the different types of church governance, and so we have those laid out here for you. And I just have four. And last one being congregational, but I just have four that we're focusing on in this class. And so churches they're governed differently, and so just be aware of those. As we go on, church officers, what is a church officer? Wayne Grudem has a great definition of a church officer here. Elders and deacons are the two offices, so be familiar with that. These words for church officers are very important. They all are synonymous in many ways: elder, pastor, overseer. And so, as you see at the last part, the term elder is synonymous with the terms bishop and pastor in position and function. Definitely be aware of that, familiar with those things. As far as church officers, the major functions of an elder include, and so there are three main things that elders do, and so be able to have that, or be knowledgeable of those things so that you can answer the questions on the test. Exemplary leadership. Know what Paul brought as a pastor and as an apostle. What are the things that he brought? He set the example, standard, boundaries, tone, and he did it in a wonderful way. Then qualifications of elders. Be familiar with 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1 and what that means. So there are 15 things that we need to pretty much be aware of there, so be aware of those. The next thing is Acts chapter 16, verses 1 through 5. Be familiar with that passage. A godly minister, what characteristics do they have? And you can see that here. Next, the purpose of the church. Three main things that I'll ask you about in the test, so be aware of those. The next thing, 6 distinguishing marks of a call to gospel ministry, and be able to write those down, be able to give those back to me if I ask you about those. Next thing, this is a quote that a lot of people use when talking to someone about ministry or their call to ministry. If you can do something else and be happy, do it. It's been said so many times by different people, so this is just another example of that, so make sure you know about that. Pastoral ministry development. A call to pastoral ministry is a call to prepare. God does not call the equipped, He equips the called. Be familiar with those concepts. I think that's very, very important. 5 benefits of bivocational ministry. And so know the 5 benefits of bivocational ministry and why they really matter. Next thing, questions for the pastoral search team. Pastoral candidates should ask the following things, or ask for them. They want to know. We need to know if we're going into a new position what these things are. Know this quote by R.A. Torrey. Be familiar with that quote. Ministering to your wife. A loving husband recognizes his wife has many needs, and one of the most important things for pastoral ministry, someone that's going into pastoral ministry or is already in it, is taking care of their wife. That is a very important task and a very important responsibility of the husband in that role. Nurturing your children, what does that look like? Well, here are 8 things. They all begin with S, and so kind of know these very well. about nurturing your children. The last one there is secure them, but be able to share those things while taking the test if need be. Nurturing your children, love and discipline. These are 4 wonderful things that you can know and be able to articulate. So be aware of this. Know this pretty well. The next thing is talking more about the passage in Exodus chapter 18 that Moses was very busy, actually too busy, too many responsibilities, and so his father-in-law Jethro taught him or gave him some advice, some insight of how to do some things. And so these are leadership principles that we can take away, but leadership principles from Exodus, and I want you to know these 6 leadership principles that you can find in that chapter especially. The next part here is take care of your family. How do you take care of your family when you come into a new place? What does that mean? Well, there are a lot of things to that. So if God calls you to a new area of ministry, you need to set up your home, make family a priority, communicate daily, enjoy meals regularly. We need to focus on these things. I do a slide here about read the Word, believe the Word, live the Word. What do we do? How do we live life? How do we begin well in ministry? How do we do it? Well, stay humble, stay hungry, stay hopeful, stay helpful, pray without ceasing. This is how you come into a ministry, and so you need to know those things. How do you stay connected with church or people in the church? Emailing, texting, group apps, social media, things like that. Home visitations. I've got a couple of slides here about home visitations, then gospel or hospital visitation. And so when you do home visitations, I think there's some good practices here, some best practices, and so I've got those laid out for you. Also some great practices or best practices with hospital visitation. And so know those. I have more for hospital visitation just because of the setting of it and how important that is. And there are certain protocols, and we have to in some hospitals you have to get you have to be approved, and so you have to walk through all that stuff. So I have those slides there. And then ministry when someone passes away. What does ministry look like in that time? Practical insights for funerals, and so I have some of those there. Know the 5 R's of a funeral sermon, and I get this from the website justdisciple.com. And so I have the 5 R's here that are important. And then when you're building or crafting the funeral sermon, here are some steps to do that. And so I lay those out for you, which are very helpful. Ministry when somebody passes away. I think it's important to say a phrase when you're doing funerals. And you don't have to say this phrase, but I think something like it is very important. And it's, if John Smith was with us today, what would he share with us? So it's the question whether somebody, if somebody did not know the Lord, had rejected the Lord in their lifetime, or they had received the Lord and they had trusted in him. Either way, they would say the same thing, that Jesus is Lord, and that he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and only in him is their righteousness. And so they're going to say that, and they're going to preach the gospel to us. So know that. Pastoral counselors, why should you offer pastoral counseling? So I've got thoughts there for why you should offer that. So I've got 4 points you need to know. There are 2 types of grief that people normally deal with: anticipatory grief, things that have not happened yet, but they're going to happen, and that's kind of a fear type of grief. And then actual grief, sadness, pain, and loss of a loved one. Stages of grief. We see that there are a lot of stages in grief, and so be aware of these stages, know these stages as you are ministering to somebody. Common reasons why couples need marriage counseling. What are those reasons? So I have those laid out for you there. Next thing, grief ministry, dealing with guilt and anger and resist, turning, hope, affirm reality, all those types of things. So when we're talking about how the steps of grief, we see those here. That's really, really important. Then the scriptural framework for marriage. we need to be able to give people a framework for what marriage is really all about. And so be able to hone in on the wedding and the structure of marriage and know this passage, Genesis 2:24, and know leave, cleave, and weave. The next thing, be familiar with this quote by Joe Level, or Lavelle, however you might say that. God's design for marriage has never been rooted in our best efforts, but rather in himself. Be familiar with the Shema, Deuteronomy chapter 6. This is a great passage. It's verses 1 through 12, and be familiar with it. And what I'm going to mainly ask you about, as you're familiar with that passage, I'm going to ask you about raising godly children and teaching them. And what are we teaching them? To fear the Lord, obey the Lord, love the Lord, serve the Lord, and remember the Lord. So we'll focus on those things. All right? Okay. Well, that is our midterm review that's coming up very soon. I'm praying for you. Study well, and be looking on looking on the interactive forum for the dates for when you'll be taking the midterm exam. And praying for you. I know you'll do well. God bless you. Bye-bye.